Hello, everyone. My name is Umesh Lakshman, the host and creator of Breaking Boundaries. Before we begin, I wanted to take a moment and thank you for choosing to tune in to this program, either on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. With the plethora of options out there, my goal is to make this a valuable, insightful, and thought provoking use of your time. You can find more information about both me and the program at www.breakingboundariesonline.com. If you know anyone who would like to be part of this program, or if you'd like to be featured on this podcast, please drop me an email to Umesh, UMESH, at breakingboundariesonline.com. The goal of Breaking Boundaries as a platform is to interview everyday heroes to share their learnings, their struggles, and the wins in the search for a more inclusive and diverse landscape, both within and outside of the workplace. Each of them have transcended stereotypes and have created something not only for themselves, but also for others. So without further ado, welcome to Breaking Boundaries. To launch off this podcast, I interview Antonette Ligons, who is the Director for Diversity and Inclusion at 2K Games. Antonette and I crossed paths during our time at Cisco Systems. Antonette is one of the original founders of an employee resource group or organization within the company called Men for Inclusion. As part of this conversation, we talked through race, her journey being a woman of color, her struggles and tipping points, as well as other cultural stereotypes, and how it drives a discussion around privilege and power. Alongside me, we had Tanya Escobar, the current global leader for Men for Inclusion within Cisco, co-hosting this episode. May the force be with us. So, like I said, this is thank you for being our guinea pig through this whole Breaking Boundaries, whatever we want to call it, right? Podcast, videocast, episode, initiative we're trying to take here. The goal of today was to learn more about your journey, in short. And you have a very, let's just say, a resume worth the journey just around diversity and inclusion that you have had in the past. And one of the things that I was mentioning to Tanya before you just hopped on is you're the OG.
Really?
For real.
So
Oh.
I'm going to have Tanya introduce you as kind of our co-host. And then I have maybe a bunch of initial questions, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
Tanya, all yours.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this session. I'm proud to introduce our first heavy hitter guest, Antonette Ligons, who has been an exemplary lead in this journey of DEI, and who was the former PM for Men for Inclusion, global lead, and introduced me to the work and the journey. So thank you for being with us. Really excited to get your kind of your own experience from your own words, right? Because you've done so much, not only lead a network that has grown exponentially globally, but also leading it into new directions, of really what does it mean to intently bring people in, and join in the conversation and action for equity and inclusion. So welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for that great opening and introduction. I'm not the OG. I've been doing this work with, the help of you guys, people that have the same passion and values and want to see the same change in this world. So it can't be done with just one person. But thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate that. I love the deep dive into this conversation. So this is a great forum for that. Thanks.
Awesome. So yeah, there is no format we're going to stick to be very honest.
Okay.
But to just kind of get you warmed up, So how did your journey with diversity and inclusion first start? And maybe a kind of a follow-up question there is, what was that tipping point where you decided, you know what, something's got to be done, and I'm going to start doing something now?
Yeah, great question. Great question. It makes me kind of think about my journey, these many years. When you first posed the question, when did your diversity journey start? For me, it's been all my life. I mean, I think a lot of us with, being immigrants or African Americans or, um, different than the majority of the people in America, your journey starts, kind of from day one when you notice that difference. But then you phrase the question, what was the tipping point for you? So that to me was a very personal journey as well. And it happened while I was at Cisco. So I've had the fortunate journey to see my color, to see my gender, to see that as a strength. So anytime I went into a conference room or an environment where I was the minority, I saw that as an opportunity to maybe dispel some stereotypes, as an opportunity just to kind of shine in my own light because I knew I'd be the only unique one in that space.
Hmm.
And so I was able to take advantages of various opportunities, like being able to go to college, being able to actually get a PhD. So at some point in my life, I got a job at Cisco, working with one of the most important high tech companies in the world. So at some point in my life, I felt like, I've got this diversity thing beat. I've got this thing under control because I've been able to have successes. Then I was hit with a personal journey of my own where I lost my husband to cancer. And so that for me was really, it kind of just knocked everything from up under me. All the security that I thought I had, all of the stereotypes I thought I just dispelled, it really kind of made my future very uncertain. And at the time, I was working at Cisco and I was leading a global project. And I was so afraid of telling people at Cisco because first off, I didn't want to be thought of as someone that needed sympathy because I had been very
Hmm.
independent and gaining successes on my own throughout my life without,
Yeah.
much, sympathy. And then the second part is I didn't want my job to be taken away from me. I was now going to be the only provider for my family. So with that being the case, I didn't tell anybody until he passed away. Then he passed away, and I had to take time off of my job, and I stepped away. And everybody at Cisco, from my coworkers and my peers, all the way up to the CEO, John Chambers, reached out to me and said, Antonette, there's no way you should go through this by yourself. When you come back to Cisco, you're going to have your job secure. Don't worry about that. Go out and take time for your family. And for people giving of themselves to me that way, I just thought, oh my goodness, what compassion. They don't really know me, personally. They know my work, but wow, when I come back to Cisco, I want to make sure that everybody feels included, that no one has to feel like they're by themselves because of some personal thing that they're going through. So I
Hmm.
came back to Cisco. My job obviously was secured. I had a promotion waiting for me, and my team just
Awesome.
really became my family at that point. So that was the tipping point for me. I felt like I wanted to give back to every employee at Cisco. I wanted to make sure we were all felt included, no matter what our background was, our circumstances, our story. We all had something valuable to give to the organization. And that's really the platform that I ran on and how we basically started Men for Inclusion and really our philosophy today. It really hasn't changed, but that was the tipping point for me and just making sure that I had access to programs to create opportunities for other inside of Cisco.
Mm.
It actually leads into the next question, which Tanya is going to ask. But I do want to come back and touch upon that one big point you mentioned is privilege. And maybe we should touch upon that later in today's session.
Mm. Yeah, so you mentioned, your personal tipping point. But how do you get into the conversation with other leaders within Cisco to really have the genesis of MFI be realized, right? What were the drivers that really motivated, you, Casey Wu, Paul Chiswell, was it Lance Perry, and some of the other executives to really, get in the zone to really create MFI?
So I remember it was about 8 years ago, there was a USA Today article. And the article was about Jesse Jackson coming to Silicon Valley and talking about the lack of diversity in Silicon Valley. In the same article, they printed diversity statistics for all the big companies, and everybody's statistic looked dismal. It was very embarrassing. It was a big spotlight on a huge problem that was happening in Silicon Valley. And Cisco actually had resources and some programs already, trying to address this problem. So coming into it, knowing that we had a huge ocean to boil, really, I wanted to focus on what was going to get us the right impact. And so I had been involved with various initiatives, diversity initiatives, and they were always around women or helping people of color, helping people with different abilities, but they were always with the same people. So I'd be in meetings with the same women talking about these important issues. Then I'd go into the Black professional arena and it'd be the same Black professionals talking about these issues. We really didn't see any traction. We didn't see any traction in our numbers. We didn't see any real leadership support. We didn't see, the impact and the opportunity being seized. So I just happened to be in the space, and I was tapped by Sherry Slate. She says, Antonette, I've got a program called Men for Inclusion. Right now it's got 2 sponsors, and we're looking for a program manager. And I thought immediately, my reaction was Men for Inclusion. Why? Like a diversity program for men. I didn't see the connection, but I didn't tell her no. I said, okay, let me go home and think about it, and I'll get back to you. And so I went home and I researched and just, tried to dive deep into the whole diversity conversation and why it was important to involve men. And I read an article. It was a Harvard Business Review article, 2016, and it surveyed men in Fortune 500 companies. And it asked them, do they feel included or excluded in the diversity conversation? For over 70% of them felt excluded. And for me, that wasn't a big surprise because, again, I've worked in this space. I've worked with a lot of leaders, and a lot of them, diversity is not top of mind for them. It's kind of the last thing on their list when they're trying to run their business. So at the same time, I also knew that there would be no way that we would have a program inside of Cisco and exclude 70% of the people, the leaders, and expect that program to be successful. So it was the same approach we were taking with diversity. And the light bulb went off in my head like, okay, we've got men who want to do something. They don't know what to do. They hold a lot of power, seniority in the organization, in the company. Why not galvanize them and create an actual forum where they can come together and talk about their allyship journey and help each other grow in a way that's going to be meaningful and help other underrepresented groups inside of Cisco? That idea really did sink in with the executives. They were brought on, and every time I talked through with them through the idea, everyone said yes. I never got a no because it just seemed like a no-brainer to really start galvanizing the support of all of our executives, especially the males. So yeah, that's kind of how that whole thing came to fruition.
It's amazing.
That is an awesome story. And just because, if that was 2016, it's 2020 now, and I've been doing MFI for a year. And one of the common challenges I face is how do I galvanize more of me? Right? There's maybe hundreds of hurdles there just to cross through, and we'll maybe uncover them to some extent today. What were your biggest hurdles in going from, hey, we need to do something, to actually getting to do something?
Yes. Okay. A couple of things. The first one we talked about was, you already mentioned, was the galvanizing the support. How do you get people turned on to that? So, we had a couple different strategies. At first, we thought, traditionally you want leadership support. You want it from the top down. You want, leaders to really understand that this is important. So we started in San Jose with the busiest leaders in the world. And, we really found that we didn't make traction with them. They didn't have time. They, were running these multi-million dollar portfolios, diversity. The environment did not demand for them to take diversity seriously at this point. So we looked for other opportunities. And what we did find was that our program team seemed to be growing, and they were growing with young males. And we hit on that, millennials get it. People born, after the Generation X generation, I guess, if you will, after that, it really is a conversation about, why don't you have this program? I can't believe your organization doesn't have anything like this. So we were behind the ball in terms of their mindset and where they expected companies to be in terms of their inclusion journey. So we got the support of a lot of our early in careers. And when their managers, their vice presidents started seeing their involvement, they changed their mind. And it was actually a meeting that I had privy to. One of senior VP had his leadership meeting, and they were talking about the issues in their organization, specifically the gender imbalance. And one of the people in the meeting said, "We need MFI." And he said, "What is MFI?" And once he found out what MFI was, it was kind of like, that was it. That was the key to his the solution to his challenge. And so he started being a supporter of MFI, and we really got more traction, more money, donations, and more involvement ultimately. So that was one of the biggest challenges, and still continues to be a challenge. Now the environment is kind of dictating that organizations place diversity as one of their top priorities. Right. I love to see that. I really would like to see the focus more on men. People are just kind of getting a hold of that notion as maybe something that they want to try to start looking at and uncovering. It's something that was very innovative for Cisco, because now, even when I talk to other companies, they can't understand how we've done it and done it so well. We're really one of the only companies that have a really robust allyship program for our men. So happy with the outcome so far.
So great cue in for a shameless plug about MFI, which is, I think you kind of delineated one of the biggest, and by the way, I'm the engineer on the call, so I'm going to say things like delineated. So you kind of highlighted one of the biggest challenges, right? There's a big difference between organizational priority and putting that priority to operation. And actually being able to get outcomes that translate. It's a long-term journey. MFI, to be, for everybody who's listening, is all about enabling frontline individuals, frontline managers, frontline leaders from a bottoms-up approach to align to potentially a top-down organizational priority. So that's the way I see it. And maybe Tanya and Antonette, you can maybe comment on that as well, because I feel it gives us tangible tools versus just a slide to look at and be like, great, now I got to do this, but I don't know how. This lets us go from the how to the what, and these are the things that we got to repeatedly do.
I like that perspective, Umesh, because you know why? It really is different. It keeps us honest, and it's a sounding board for us to making sure we are course correcting. The other thing I really love about MFI is how we get our men. A lot of our men are nominated by women. So initially we didn't want, just people to say, "Oh, I'm with MFI," and just checking the box saying they're a part of our program. We really wanted men who walk the walk and talk the talk. And so we asked for nominations. We asked people, women who knew men who had helped them in their career, who were really inclusive, innovative leaders, to start nominating men to take leadership positions inside of MFI. When we did that, and then having, Tanya and myself as program leads, women in charge of a male, leading a male allied organization, what better sounding boards could you have? And so just the fact that MFI traditionally didn't get started the traditional way EROs do, or just other company or networks, we really have a unique positioning because of the way that we started and the way that we have organically grown. I think it just gives us more credibility, and it shows us and it shows, our stakeholders that everybody has a space in MFI. It's not just for white guys. It's not just
Right.
for men. It's not just for women. It's for all of us who want to take part in this inclusion journey. And we all help each other in various ways.
Right.
Yeah, that's phenomenal because I, I love what he said there is to be an inclusive male, you got to start with listening to what you need to be implementing first to have more of not you. So that's literally how I see it. And one of the biggest learnings that I had is as part of the MFI process, you have these listening sessions when you start a chapter, because I know I'm mentoring a chapter now. And I was like, I didn't even know that there was a very structured approach to going about doing that. And it was like one of those aha moments as to be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. We should maybe strategize around what the community wants versus what we want.
Right.
Yes, bingo. That was
Yep.
one of the big, another challenge, we were talking about challenges earlier, was the optics on having a whole male network. I mean, when people first heard of MFI, they really got scared. And I had someone tell me, Antonette, you're really going to put men in a room and have them make decisions about diversity? Are you crazy? And so optically, that did not look good. But what I convinced them was, just what we said is if they want the information, why not give it to them in a structured form where we can all learn? And if they're okay with, having a woman lead the program, then even more kudos to them. Let's not, fight that. Let's go with the tide and really create something that's sustainable and that works for everyone that wants to be involved. And so we really had to reposition that, but I think that was one of the biggest challenges that started to be a real success for us.
Yeah, that's what resonates with me as well. In living MFI, it's not designed to be an echo chamber just for men, right? It's really those decisions
I
that
think we
will
have enough of those already. But
that will impact the work, the inclusion ecosystem. Really do have to take in the feedback and the inputs of those that it will impact. It really needs to center them. So I think that's extraordinary in how this network differentiates itself as an advocate kind of network for within Cisco.
you both briefly touched on this, and I'm going to put you on the spot, and maybe this is where the gloves are coming off, which is both of you are women leading a male allyship network. How did that go? What were the brutal realities that you faced as part of that function? And what can men who are trying to join MFI do better when we look at leadership from a non-gender oriented lens?
So, good questions. For me, what I initially thought was there's no way they're going to listen to a woman talk about allyship. I had my own stereotype about what I thought the men wanted to see and how I would be received. And I almost talked myself out of being a program manager a few times.
Interesting.
Especially when we launched to locations that were heavily male dominated, like India. I tried my best to get a white guy to come and speak for me, to be my mouth, to talk about MFI on behalf of me. And it didn't pan out. And I went there and I was blown away by the openness, by the welcoming that I got, by they were like, thank goodness someone from headquarters is coming to talk about our issues. They were so the women there just welcomed another woman who could really understand their unique challenges. And I'm just going to put it out there. I don't know. I think the men just appreciated another brown skinned person from headquarters really talking about their challenges. I am a woman, and I'm sure there's some differences that holds for them, but I did not feel it. I felt so welcomed. And so for me, I think, as we're launching in these different locations, it's just very, very important that we get out of our own way. you know, we have our own biases, and
Mhm.
just because I'm a Black woman doesn't mean I'm not biased or that I understand bias very deeply. I'm still just a person who's learning and growing. And so the mission for MFI, if it connects with you, it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, the position you are in, there is a place for you there. So yeah, that was my experience and kind of just trying to understand that unique dynamic.
Antoinette, I'm so glad you said that because, and I just want to say I see you, because that feeling of imposter syndrome is, it's so prevalent, even in myself, stepping into the
Yeah.
role as the lead. Like, it's daunting to say, okay, you will lead a large network of men, to try and really not just influence the culture within your own company, but it's a mindset change, it's a culture change, right? That is very daunting. But the flip side of that coin is that I realize, through working with such passionate people and having conversations, is that men feel imposter syndrome too,
Mhm.
right? Men have these insecurities,
Amen.
about their impact and what they can do, right? So what I'm loving about this opportunity is, yes, it is incredibly uncomfortable to step into this work, to step into this network, but at the same time, hey, you probably have the same questions that I have, maybe a little bit different perspective for men and women, but through that insecurity, that's a commonality we have. And I think we can start there, right? That we can just have a conversation, learn from each other, um, with
Yeah.
grace, right? Be willing to, because people will make mistakes, but we're honoring the fact that people want to show up, and that's huge.
Yes, yes. And I'm so glad you talked about the whole fear because, you know, we always try to get our executives to really be authentic and share their stories. Any person in MFI, because it's so helpful, but there's so much fear initially in
Mm,
sharing an experience that didn't go well for you, an experience you did not master. And so
mm,
much of that, this inclusion work, this diversity work, is that it's that uncomfortable feeling of not being quite right, not being quite accepted, and just stepping out on a limb. But the
mm,
more you do it, the more trust you build with your team, the more authentic you become, and be seen as. And the more you get over that fear, and it becomes just a way for you to talk and express yourself. And people are bonded to that. They
mm,
really jive with that. And so it's more, MF5, we really build our platform on the listening, helping men listen to others and get to the point where they want to share their experience as well. And getting past that fear of not knowing everything. That's okay. We don't always have to have the answers for these hard conversations, these hard challenges that come up and topics and issues. But the fact that we're there listening and building trust and just being vulnerable with each other is such a huge step in all of us, for all of us, but especially for MFI, it's really, helping us grow together.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Thanks.
Yeah, I think from a very general, maybe shifting the lens a little bit and giving you my perspective is when you're talking about imposter syndrome, and I've had this conversation with a few men around how culture drives imposter syndrome as well.
mm,
I mean, you mentioned traveling to India. India has a very strong, like very binary culture, right? Which is when I was growing up, I was either supposed to be an engineer, a doctor, or a loser. That was a very
Oh,
drastic, like cliff dive at the end of that conversation. So it's a culture which has driven me initially to think that there was no room for failure and iteration. So for like I had to get out of my own echo chamber of going in and saying, okay, I do not know the answer,
hmm
and and I am good enough in some cases, right? It's like and I had to make statements versus ask questions. imposter syndrome sits in the land of questions, right? Am I good enough? Am I qualified enough? A lot of that going on in your echo chamber and shifting that from questions to statements to say I am good enough, right? I am very qualified to get this, and it drove a lot of the initial, let's just say, personal transformation for me. Um, and I've seen that with some others I've spoken to when we've created a safe space, for lack of a better word. I just thought
Yeah.
I should share that with both of you here as well.
It's very important for you too. I'm glad you did because so many of us, when we are in this space, we think we're the only ones. And like, Tanya mentioned, we thought we were the only ones with the whole imposter syndrome. And for you as a seasoned executive to know that you still go through that. And as many speeches that you give, that's still a challenge for you. I think it's another point to the whole MFI mission. I mean, me as a woman, I get something out of MFI, but I get something out of a woman's group too. But I find that and I get something out of the Black professionals group. But I
Hmm.
find that we have reoccurring themes. We all are feeling, the same challenges and have the same angst and pain points. So why not have these conversations where we have these intersectionalities kind of crisscrossing each other and inviting more conversations to take place about things that we thought were different, but we will probably find out we have more alike than we do different. So again, another platform for why it's so important to have MFI and other programs like that available.
Um, Switching gears a little bit, uh, maybe give us an example of things that you really walked out of here saying, wow, that was great. That was an awesome outcome when it came to diversity and inclusion. And I'm sure in your journey here with Cisco and in the DEI space, you've had a few of those. So I'm asking you to pick one, which is maybe a tough one. Uh,
Yeah.
but if there's more than one, that's completely fine.
Yes. Okay. So this is why it sticks with me because it was my very first recruiting trip. And we went to Grace Hopper. And, Grace Hopper has got the best of the best, brightest women technologists in the country 20,000 women from the best universities. And you go there and you try to hobnob with, big companies and try to get a package or get signed on.
Hmm.
And Cisco hosted a cocktail hour one night. And I was there, picking up resumes, talking to some of the students. And I noticed an African American lady. She was just sitting over to the side and she kind of eyed me when I first came in. We kind of said hi to each other. And then I'm sitting at my table. And as soon as I finish talking with one person, she comes over to me and she says, I want to give you my resume, but I want to tell you right now, I have a 2.0, like a 2.3. I really struggled last year at my college. She went to Texas A&M, and she had an internship at GE, but then she had to quit because she had to take care of her mom, and her GPA just didn't really show her true potential. And I said, but I just had a conversation with her, and I can tell she's really bright, smart girl. And she eyed me out and, had enough guts to come up and have the conversation and have that hard conversation with me and
Yeah.
not try to impress me and tell me something that she's not. And so I took her application and I set her up with the interview and she ended up getting hired in our RTP office. And she
Awesome.
sent me an email and she said, Antonette, thank you so much. You encouraged me. And I ended up getting a Cisco internship and I'm so grateful. Well, then she went on, I followed her career on LinkedIn. She went on to Price Waterhouse Cooper as a full-time program manager. She
Nice.
just sent me in a LinkedIn message. She said she was picked to study at Carnegie Mellon Hall as a fellow. She got
Nice.
a graduate apprenticeship as a fellow for Carnegie Mellon. And I went, wow. And that's because Cisco was on her resume. That's because, Price Waterhouse was on her resume. That's because we really had access to give people opportunities that they really wouldn't have in a traditional setting. And so, for me, that's all it took for me is somebody to not see me in a box and see my potential and offer that. And if I can get 100 men to do that, if I can get 1,000 men to do that, if we can get 100,000 men to do that, just think of that impact that could have for people's lives,
Yeah.
So, that for me, that story, and that just happened. She sent me that email for her Carnegie Mellon just about a month ago. And I was just like almost in tears because I've seen her full circle, So, yeah.
That's awesome.
That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
I think a lot of the biggest achievements when it comes to things like DEI are somebody else being a part of somebody else's journey,
Yes.
um, and somehow influencing or doing something that was a very pivotal point
Mm.
in their trajectory overall, like career or life or something.
Yes.
And the it's not a tangible satisfaction. I feel it's more of a it's like the you sleep well at night kind of thing.
Your
Right.
soul.
For sure. Makes all the hard days worth it. You know what I
Yeah, you
mean?
just go to bed with a smile, though it's all sucky and shit, but still, you're like, okay, great. It's like, yeah, it's all a grind, and I know we're all stuck at home and we're all staring at four walls now, but
Right.
oh well, that was worth it. And you kind of go back and you're like, okay, great, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I know we have short amount of time, so I'm gonna jump into a broader topic here, which is around just 2020.
Mm.
Um, the landscape has changed phenomenally over the last 8 9 months, um, and that's not just around diversity and inclusion, but it's I would say with this, the lens is broadened to include social justice as well. It's front and center now. What could anyone do? Any individual, right? So this could be you, me, Tanya, anybody who's listening to this, do that is tangible
Yes.
that can bring about positive change as it relates to DEI.
I've got three things that I like to tell people because, now is the time where people want to know, they want to be active allies. They want to know, how can I help support Black people? How can I help support people other than me? So there's three things that I like to do. I like to tell people. First one is to stand up when you see an injustice, right then and there. Speak up for somebody. Use your power or your privilege to right that wrong, right in time, real time. Um, the second thing is, if you are in a position of power, please create opportunities for people different than yourself. Those opportunities can be life changing for people. I mean, you just really don't know what that little decision you make that you may not even think about can really impact someone's life. And the last thing is, teach your kids how to be allies to people that are different. Embrace differences. If you have a kid who's got, a person with a disability in their class, make sure your kid is in that class and make sure your kid is one of those helpers. Just actively be an ally, mentor for your kid, and watch your kids just grow up naturally embracing diversity. So those are the three things I think anybody can do.
Yeah, I think the goal here as well, and as we kind of like finish up and kind of close out for the discussion, was to kind of learn more about your journey, right? Because I mean, I feel like we could spend maybe a full another 60 minutes and we'd be still chipping away at it. Um, one last commentary around privilege. Um, how do you define privilege?
Privilege is a position that you have based on something that gives you power.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Bingo. So the reason I kind of put you on the spot there is because I wanted that power word to come out, right? Is you would be amazed at how many things I thought I was not considering privilege till somebody kind of said like, dude, you're privileged. And I was like,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And I had one of those moments at Better Man. I think Tanya was sitting next to me when that happened too. And somebody actually said, dude, education is privilege. And I was like,
Yes, right. We
what?
sit in it, and that's the difficulty, you Umesh, because we sit in it, so we can't see it. I have privilege all day long too. My son just said, "Mom, we've been so privileged to live through this pandemic and not really feel our lives changed. What a privilege!" And I said,
Yep.
"Wow, yeah,
Yep.
wow." So yeah, everybody has a privilege. You may not feel it because you're in it, but I bet you everybody has an advantage.
Yeah. Tanya, did you have any questions for Antonette?
Oh, I could keep her here for another hour trying to pick up the right conversation. I'm sure you have a lot of amazing stories with all the different people that you work with in Cisco, and just doing this work, that how it reflects out into the industry, right? And getting to connect with other companies and other thought leaders on this. So I'll save those questions for another time, but I sincerely want to thank you for your willingness, your investment, your joy that you bring, as a fellow Cisconian, but as a Black woman, as a leader, you know, it's been such a pleasure to learn from you and work with you and try and put these bricks together for a foundation that we can carry on into the future years. So that hopefully one day, every corner of Cisco and society will have infrastructure for folks to step into the advocacy and not feel like it's not for them or an extracurricular thing. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And I appreciate you, Tanya, and I appreciate Umesh, just creating, taking the spirit of what we have and doing more with it, taking it to the next phase and that next level. And platforms like this podcast is just another example of how you guys are challenging, innovative ways to really get our diversity story out there. Thank you for having me as a special guest. I'm honored and happy to share my story.
The pleasure is all ours, is what I would say. And thank you so much again for joining us.